Hi again. We are back with our podcast, Dr. Barb and myself, Laura. And we've actually changed the name of our podcast from Taking the Lead to Teens Taking the Lead because we wanted to make sure we were really clear on who our audience is. It's teens and parents of teens. So, how are you, Dr. Barb?
I am doing well. Thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you. So, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, I think we talked about having a topic discussion around taking action. And what
That's
does that
awesome.
mean?
That sounds fantastic. And it seems like when we talk about leadership, you tend to see people who are out there doing stuff. Like that's what you think of when you hear about leaders and you say, oh, this person is leading this or leading that. And I think a lot of times with teenagers, you teach them about leadership and then they kind of expect that they have to be, the sage on the stage doing something. And it's not necessarily the case. And I think we've seen a lot of things even in the news lately about kids that are doing some fantastic things, but it doesn't always have to be that big for them to take action.
Right. Yeah, taking action is, it's kind of a stuck point, I think, for a lot of people, for adults as well. We talk about setting goals and I'm going to do all these great things, but then nothing happens. Or, I always think of like New Year's resolutions, right? Where you start the year out and it's like, oh, I got all these great goals and I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to start running and I'm going to read books and, I'm going to do all these things. And then a couple weeks in, it all goes by the wayside. And a lot of times it's either we take too much action all at once and we can't sustain that, or we don't break it down into small enough steps.
Oh yeah, true. The small steps, because I think you're right, because a lot of times again, we're seeing people do big things that we don't think about the little stuff that also can make a difference too. And I think if we're struggling trying to figure out how can we help teens get some ideas, how can we help them go out and make an impact of some kind, how can we get them to take action? And a lot of times it's just so simple where it's just, what are you interested in? Like, is there something going on in the world right now that's caught your attention? And there's big things going on. We've just to date where we are now. We've got things going on with the war in Ukraine. We've got stuff going on with the US economy, things that we see on TV all the time if you're watching the news. And you might think, well, those are some really big things. Can I do something related to that? It could also be something as simple as making an impact in your own house or at your own school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know what I also just thought about recently too, things like recycling. And, some of the marketing I remember seeing around that was like, do your part or something like that. And it was around, so it got me thinking like, oh, well, we have recycle bins. And so I put things in the recycle bins and I try to be, I compost things. And so to just be thinking, even like you mentioned it at home in your household, or even just in your local community, or for kids, like, is there something at school that you could do that could move the needle a little bit? Again, whatever that is, even if like recycling as an example, like maybe, there's a lot of waste in the cafeteria and somebody thinks of like, oh, what if we use like compostable forks, or, there's ways that we can do things a little bit differently there that still makes a difference. Sometimes we don't feel like a little thing is really making much of a difference, but that's how we have to start these things, it seems like.
Absolutely. When you're talking about that, it reminded me of, again, here we go with dates and aging ourselves right now. But, and I'll just mention that this is from reruns, not from watching live.
Yeah.
But when I would watch the Brady Bunch, the Bobby and Cindy seemed to always be into something. And it was like, one time they were into fire hazards and doing, the fire drill at the house. I don't know if you remember that
Yep.
episode, but they were going around from room to room and looking for safety hazards. And I just kept thinking, like, who does that? But when you think about it, there were some funny parts of the episode, but like when you really think about it, something as, quote unquote, simple as saying, I'm really interested in safety because I've heard stories of house fires, or I've heard stories of people having accidents in the house. Maybe that's of interest to your kids. And they say, well, I'm going to look around the house and see, do we have any safety hazards? That's like a really, really simple action step. That is something that is definitely tied into leadership. Because again, they're pinpointing something that, you know, you need to take action on, and they are taking the initiative to do that. So, you know, something again, as small as that can be, you know, an action step that definitely shows leadership. And then you also see people who are, you know, in the news, they're making the news as teenagers, or, you know, even some younger. And it could be things like the ones that are, they put together an app to help people find housing if they were getting out of the Ukraine. And I don't remember how many, but they've like literally helped hundreds of thousands, maybe more than 1 million people already. They're not getting paid to do it. They just said, we want to somehow make a difference. And, you know, they're computer people, so they put together this app and they're helping out. So, I mean, you can have something huge as an action step. You can have something small as an action step, but it all relates to, you know, taking the lead.
Yes, exactly. And I think we might have talked about this previously, but leadership is a practice, even for kids. And so the more we do these little things with our kids, encourage them to do these little things, it becomes part of who they are, you know, and for them to think about, you know, I'm the type of person that wants to have a clean world when I'm an adult, you know, and so that means I pick up litter, or I help with recycling, or, you know, again, using that as an example, but just simple little things that, again, may not feel like it's doing a lot. But the other piece too is that, you know, you start spreading the word around it, you know, and then they start getting their friends involved, and then maybe more friends, and then there's a club, or, you know, I think of like Boy Scout troops, Girl Scout troops, and they are always out in the community doing projects, and they love doing projects, you know, planting trees, or, and so it's that like community together as a group of young kids, but working on something that benefits the local communities. And so not necessarily you have to be in a club, but there's just so many things like that out there where kids can be involved with something that they're passionate about. And then to, you know, rinse and repeat, you know, you do that again and do another project, and find something else. It's kind of looking for what's missing, or what's not happening, or what could benefit or enhance somebody else's life. Well, you know, maybe, you know, starting a garden and donating the produce to the food kitchen, or, you know, there's a million ideas, but it's just, it gets them a little bit more aware of what's going on outside of themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I love that idea of, you know, the clubs. And if they're not in clubs, it doesn't mean that they can't do that. And again, back to that whole, you know, if they don't want to be somebody that's in the limelight, if they don't want to be the one that's doing something big, it could be something that is more related to, maybe they're interested in pets. Maybe you have a dog at the house, and your kid spends tons of time with the dog, and you think, well, maybe this, you know, my kid doesn't seem too inspired by stuff, but maybe you say, well, is there something you can do to help dogs? And Barb, I think you mentioned a story before about a young kid who did decide that they wanted to help with adopting dogs, right? Can you tell what
That's
that was?
right. Yes. And I apologize. I always forget this young man's name. I should know it off the top of my head. But he started making bow ties for the dogs at his local shelter. And then they would photograph the dogs with their little bow tie on. And it was just a way, and he was a kid that wore bow ties as well. And so he came up with the idea of maybe this will help some of the dogs get adopted. And it was just such a cute, sweet idea. And he loved to sew. And so he was sewing these things himself. And, you know, again, it feels like a little thing, but it turns into a big thing, because what came out of that is he changed lives for these dogs, you know, these dogs that were stuck in shelters, which in turn like enriched a family, you know, that took these dogs home. And, you know, those of us that are dog lovers or animal lovers know how much animals can enrich your life. And so it was like such a much of a bigger picture than just, you know, I like wearing bow ties. Oh, I'll make bow ties for dogs and we'll take pictures of them. But, you know, that changed the trajectory of the life for these animals. And again, for families, I mean, so it snowballed into something bigger than he probably even anticipated could have happened.
Oh, sure, sure. And, you know, even smaller thing, you know, I don't want to say that's a small thing by any means,
Yeah.
you know, but, you know, it could be something where if they don't even want to take on a project like that, it could be something like, hey, you know what, I'm going to save a little bit of my allowance money. I'm going to buy a few extra canned goods and donate them, you
Yep.
know, because I feel like it's important that people that are struggling right now have enough to eat. It could be, it doesn't even have to be something monetary. It could be maybe writing letters to some people that are in some of the retirement homes. And there's lots of things to do out there. So some suggestions as parents, what can you do to inspire this in your kid? What can you get to, get them to take action? And I think one of the first things, Dr. Barb, hopefully you agree with this, is like, you just need to ask them, what's your interest? Like,
Yes.
what inspires you?
Yes.
What have you heard in the news, or what have you seen around town or at school? Is there something that bothers you or inspires you that makes you say, I think there's something I can do about that?
Yes. Yep. And I think of I read news stories and I'm always looking for teen stories. Laura knows that's one of my things, is like I try to find these fun stories about kids. And so as a parent, as you're reading the news, if you come upon a story about a teen that's done something cool, share that with your kiddo and have a discussion around it. Like, wow, what do you think about this? Like, check out what this kid did. And, hopefully they'll look at that and go, wow, that's really cool. And it may spark some ideas within them, just
Absolutely.
kind of
And I,
seeing what some other kids are doing.
oh yeah, for sure. And again, you get them, you ask for that inspiration, you find some examples for them, and then you want to challenge their creativity, because kids are so creative. And sometimes it's obvious that they're creative because you might say, oh, I see them draw all the time. Or the kid you mentioned with the dogs who likes to sew, you might see something that's kind of an obvious talent in that area. Some kids might be great with words. They might really like to write, rap songs, or they play the guitar. And it's then taking what it is that they like to do and what it is that's inspired them from, again, current events or something that's happening around the area or something in school, and figuring out how, is there a way to tie those things together? Because
Right.
that's when you get really creative,
Yeah.
because I don't think most people would have thought, oh, I'm going to make bow ties for dogs. But
Right.
that's a great thing where you're really inspired by something, connecting it with something that you love to do. And that's when you get some really great ideas.
Yep. Yep. And so I think as parents, to just be on the lookout, kind of be on the lookout for these types of stories, be very aware, like Laura said, of, do your kids have some like creative or even just things they like to do with their hands, building birdhouses or, doing woodwork. Like I have a neighbor who loves working in the workshop with his dad, and he makes pens and carves all sorts of things. And he's the type of kid, he's out in the workshop with his dad versus on a video game or on his computer. He's like doing stuff with his hands. He loves that. And he's actually in college now, and he does like 3D printing of all this like amazing stuff that you'd never even, I'm like, whoa, the stuff that he makes. But he just loves that creative part. So really nourishing that in your kids is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think just those simple steps, and thinking again about what's going on out there, how can you connect those things? I mean, I think that's going to put a lot of kids in great position to start doing some really great things.
Yep. Yep.
And we
So,
definitely, when they do something great, we want to recognize it. And it doesn't have to go into the
right.
newspaper, but when you see them doing something that's inspiring to you, a simple, that's great. I really think that's going to make a difference, even if it's for one or two people. I think you're going to have an impact. I think you're going to make a difference. And that's so critical. And I think one of my lights went out. Okay. But yeah, so parents, help your kids with that. And then let's get those kids out there doing more stuff.
Awesome. So take action. That's the
Absolutely.
message for today.
Well, we will be back with you next week. And if you have any interest in a particular topic, please let us know. And we'd also love for you to check out what's going on our Facebook page. You can do that by going to Facebook and searching for the Teen Leadership Academy. And you can also reach us by email at info@theteenleadershipacademy.com. And we would love to hear from you. So in the meantime, have a good rest of the week.
All right. See you soon.
Take care.